just believe in the power of healing and restoration. And I know that if we can just come together and speak about the hard things, we can finally begin to heal. So, this is where we heal.
How have you been?
Oh, I'm good. And you?
Yeah, I've been busy. I've been very, very busy.
Do you travel a lot?
I don't. I've been actually living with family for the last 5 months, just to because I was in Bali and I was around a little bit, just to really build some roots and foundations with the amount business is kind of demanding from me at the moment. So
No, that's nice. That's really nice. So you must be close to your family then.
somewhat. I mean, as close as I can be.
Okay. Enough said. I can relate to that for sure.
Yeah, it's got to love people where they're at sometimes.
Yeah, well, that is the deal with family and everyone else, really. You know? If we're honest.
The rest of the world.
Well, so what I love is that you work specifically with men's health and healing, and I think it's so needed. I wish there were more people doing it, because I do think that there are so many struggles and misconceptions going on with men's mental health in general, and I think there's a huge divide between men and women, especially right now. And I wish I knew the ways to kind of bridge that gap, but I think it really truly starts with healing as an individual, whether female or male. But I think a lot of men are struggling in that area because they don't know where to go. They don't know how. There's so many different cultural things that make it seem silly or, not something men should do if they want to be masculine. And so I'm really excited to dive into this.
It's gonna be powerful. Yeah, and I'm just excited to continue sharing this work, sharing what I'm so deeply passionate about. And yeah, exactly that. It's a lot of the foundation of healthy relationships is men really being in their healthy leadership. So
yeah, I love that. And so let's start with how you went down this path, how you ended up doing what you do now, and what led you here.
Yeah, awesome. As in share it now?
No, I mean, sorry. No, what led you to this place in your life? Sorry, I was not very specific on that, but just in general, what your story is, if you don't mind sharing, and how you started your own healing journey that led you to coaching other people.
Beautiful. Do you want me to go into the whole story now? Are we recording?
If you're open to it, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. As in we've started the podcast?
Yeah.
You want me to? Yeah, cool. Beautiful.
We'll do the introduction stuff afterwards. So yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I should have referenced that.
Yeah, I just didn't want to go into a whole story and then be like, okay, now we're started.
So I would love to know how you got started on your own self-healing journey and what led you into coaching.
Yeah. So for me, it began with, I started in construction. So, the beginning of my journey, I was in building, I was in construction, and that was really the catalyst and the turning point for pretty much for everything I'm now doing. So what that looked like was, and I speak to it as if that was really the big awakening for me was that identity of the man that was, in construction. I was building a carpentry business. I was 21 years old. It was quite successful. I was doing up to $15,000 to $20,000 a week as a 21-year-old. I was looking at starting to employ full-time people to work for me. Wow. So yeah, I was working 6-7 days a week. But what led to that identity was this little boy who felt that he needed to prove himself in order to be worthy of love. And I grew up racing motocross. My whole life's mission was to be a professional athlete in some sport. And it was all from the foundation of this little boy who didn't feel like who he was enough. who he was okay. And he got praised for achievement. He got praised for doing well. You know, my dad held such high standards for me, which is incredible. You know, he just wanted the best for me. But the thing is, with those standards, every time I achieved or met the standards, he would raise the bar again. And instead of like, what's really important is, and we'll probably get deeper into this, but the number one thing that we need as children is this solid, like this bedrock and this foundation of love and support, no matter what. No matter if we fail, if we make a mistake, no matter if we're angry, no matter if we do something wrong, we need to know that there's this underlining bedrock of love and support. Now, when that's not there, right, and as children, like the world revolves around us as it has to, so we can get our needs met. And we're just meaning-making machines as we're starting to form, our brain's starting to form and shape this identity of who we are in this world. And what happens then is, as a little boy, you know, trying to meet dad's expectations and his standards, I started to make that mean that, well, there's obviously something inherently wrong with who I am, because my being alone is not enough for love. I must be something other than myself in order to be loved. So through achieving, through doing well, through being who I thought, you know, my dad wanted me to be, or my parents wanted me to be, through that, I built this false self. And that led me to, you know, being in construction, working a job that I hated, yet I was really good at, because I was very good at using my pain as my motivator, as my driver. So I became really good at everything I did, but from the place of trying to prove that I'm worthy or good enough. Now, beneath that was also some deep mother wounds as well, around, you know, experiencing, you know, the separation between my parents. And this little boy, and I'll share it now. So there's 3 core needs that we really need to have met in childhood to feel safe enough to be ourselves. See, as a little boy, my nervous system didn't feel safe to be myself, because I didn't feel that bedrock of love and support in the way that I needed it. I didn't feel that emotional connection in the way that I needed it. So what happened was I became shame-based. There's something inherently wrong or broken with me. And what happens is as a little boy, I internalized that shame, where it's no longer I've made a mistake, it's I am the mistake. Or it's no longer I've made a fuck up or something like that. It's I am a fuck up. Right? It becomes who we are, it becomes the identity. But beneath that was also deep mother wounds and of experiencing, going through my parents' separation. And that little boy, as I shared before, were meaning-making machines, right? And I made it mean that was my responsibility, or it was my fault, because there's 3 core needs that we need to have met in childhood. Coming back to that, the first one is to know that we're loved. There's that bedrock of support, no matter what, even if we make a mistake, right? That love is not pulled away from us. The second one is to know that we matter, that our emotional experience matters, that we're a priority, right? So for me, what I experienced was parents who had so much stuff going on in their world, rightfully so, right? And with that, I didn't feel like I was emotionally a priority. And the shame that comes from that, from a child, is deep. It's this deep sense of there's something inherently wrong with me because I'm not a priority, right? We're narcissistic in our core. Like, we need that to feel and to get our needs met. And the third one is to know that our parents are okay. Because if they're not okay, we either make it mean that it's our fault or it's our problem.
Yeah, that's so true.
This little boy that experienced this sense of emotional disconnection, right? This emotional unavailability, then experiencing, his parents' separation and divorce. I made it mean that it was my fault, right? Or it was my problem. Then I got in the middle of it, and pretty much I held the grief, the grief of both of them, of what they went through. I held the anxiety, the fear of abandonment, watching the 2 people I love most separate, and the confusion of that, the betrayal of that, right? And then not only that, but the energetic disconnect before the relationship even got to that point. As a child, we were energetic. It was so sensitive to energy. I could feel that. And it was this underlining sense of, it's a matter of time before the people I love most leave. They're going to leave at some point. They're going to abandon me. So what would happen was all of this then built up, the shame, the grief, the loneliness of that little boy who felt this emotional disconnect. I then at 21 years old was, I was in a relationship from the place of fear that I'm with this person because I'm so afraid of being alone. This little boy gets into relationships and attracts women who are emotionally unavailable, who can't actually show up and meet him in the way he needs to reflect back to him that he's not worthy enough, he's not good enough. And it is a matter of time before they leave. It is a matter of time before you get abandoned. So not only that, but then being in a career, being in construction where I was so deeply unfulfilled because I wasn't going after what my heart wanted. I was going after what my ego wanted, which was validation that you're good enough and that you're worthy enough for being a man. Yeah. All of this then built up to being 21 years old, going through a separation where she did leave me. She did abandon me. Then I'm stuck in this career that I hate. I'm making money. It makes no sense. And I eventually got to this point where it was about a period about 6 months where I was heavily considering it'd be so much easier and so much more less painful to leave this world than it would be to stay in it. And what then happened was, and that was really the initiation into this work, into men's work, into personal development, into really bettering myself as a man. And what happened was, I actually went on a holiday for 2 weeks overseas, and I was able to get out of my environment. And by getting out of my environment, I was able to see the life that I created for myself. And I recognized that, well, if I created this, right, then surely I can create. Now that I'm aware that I created this, imagine what I could create from a conscious place. So what I did was I came back from that holiday and I put all my tools in the shed, and I made a decision that I will never not put my happiness first ever again. And that was the first time I listened to my heart. And in doing so, I went all in on coaching. I started training athletes in the gym, and I started working with people's mindset, started really diving a lot into my journey, my growth. So the last close to a decade now has really been me just going all in on myself, in investing in programs, coaches, mentors, going to events, doing all the stuff, investing well over $250,000 in myself now, just doing everything for me, and just going after what truly excites me and lights me up and makes me happy. And in doing so, I've been able to discover the depth of this work that I now get to take men into, which is really healing the little boy and awakening the man. Because that's been my evolution and my journey over the last decade. It's been me really integrating that little boy and stepping into my power as a man along the way.
Wow, I am almost speechless. I've been trying not to cry this whole time because I have to admit that in the work that I do, where I advocate for women and men too, but mostly women, just because violence is a lot higher in men towards women, is that sometimes you can get disillusioned and you can start to see, men as a whole as just bad, this bad thing that will hurt you. And I've been trying recently to understand it more, but I don't think I've ever heard a man speak the way that you have before on your experience. I don't know that a lot of men would even know how to go that far within themselves to do that. But it just made me realize how much more alike we are than we are different. And there's the divide, I think, gets higher and higher all the time because there's these narratives that all men are bad or all women are bad. And the more we hurt each other and the more shallow our cultures get and the more superficial dating gets, the worse that narrative gets. And so
yes.
I look at what everything you just said, and I go, okay, maybe this isn't about men or women. Maybe this is truly just us learning how to heal. And when we can finally heal, we can actually come together on all the things that make us alike. And it just makes me a little bit weepy because there have been so many times where I didn't know if that was going to be possible, Yeah. So that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That is so beautiful. I'm going to try to pull it together here, but
I like to say on that. I was going to say, I like to say on that there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. There's only unhealthy expressions of it based on the little boy that's actually playing out, that's either seeking to have his needs met, right? Or this little boy who didn't actually develop that connection with his emotional body, and he doesn't know what to do with the built up suppressed emotions that are in his body because it's been so, out of context or so foreign to him to actually feel his anger, to set boundaries, to be able to know that it's actually healthy for him to express and feel and cry and to be really in tune with his feminine body. So I like to say that, there's no such thing as only healthy or unhealthy expressions based on the unresolved trauma or wounds that a little boy experiences in childhood, and then his whole, paradigm of what it means to be a man. So
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. What do you think is the first step for like just a man that like someone that comes to you and says, look, I struggle with rage and I struggle with anger and I feel like I'm falling short in every area of my life and I'm not happy with my job and my relationships are failing and I don't know how to, come out of this. What is that first step for a man? Because it is, I do think in some ways still different for women.
How I like to explain it is, if you imagine like a big tree, and all of the leaves of the tree are all the current things that are going on in let's say a man's life, right? The relationship breakdown, the stress of work, the anxiety, the overwhelm, like all of this stuff that he's experiencing in his life are like all of the leaves. And the leaves are a byproduct of the roots of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that's happening in your current world and reality right now is just a reflection of the original pain, the roots of what's actually happening beneath the surface. So everything, so like rage, anger, that built up, like suppressed anger that then leads to reactivity, defensiveness in relationship, and we're being emotionally shut down or being like the anxious, insecure, nice guy. It's really getting clear on how is that a reflection of the unresolved pain that you experienced as a little boy? Because there's no separation. Who we are today is a direct reflection of who we were yesterday and the day before. Like every single second has led us to exactly this moment. There's no separation.
Yeah.
And through what's called implicit memory, our body's emotional memory, we store this information in our body. So all of this built up suppressed emotion that's been stored over all of the years, when it comes to implicit memory, it has no timeline. It doesn't know the difference between what happened when you were 5 years old and what's happening right now in this moment.
Yeah, that's
So what's happening right now in this moment is a reflection of what that little boy experienced in childhood. Now, bringing it back to anger or rage, that is just the lid to the emotion that's actually beneath the surface. And typically it's the unresolved grief of the unmet needs of that little boy, the love and connection he didn't receive, the support and guidance he didn't receive, right? The depth of masculine leadership or the masculine initiation from boy to man that he didn't receive, right?
Yeah.
Or it's this shame. It's the toxic shame that he's embodied in his nervous system based on a little boy who felt like there was something inherently wrong or broken with me, or took on the responsibility or the weight of his parents' emotions and made it mean that it's his fault or it's his problem. So a lot of defensiveness or reactivity in relationship is actually a man doing everything in his power unconsciously to avoid being exposed, exposing the shame that's actually beneath the surface. So this is why when a woman brings a man something, brings him awareness of how he could show up better, he either becomes reactive or shut down.
Yeah.
Because beneath that would mean that I'm not good enough for you, which would then actually, and the reactivity or defensiveness is the shame that's actually coming through his body, and he shuts down or doesn't know what to do with it because he's disconnected emotionally. So the first step is really becoming clear on, first of all, developing a connection to your emotions, like being able to label what you feel in this moment. Like that's a conscious practice. Like when you wake up in the morning, check in. how do I feel? Right? Write it down. Maybe I feel a little bit tired. Okay, interesting. Like write that down. What's beneath that tiredness? Oh, like a little bit of sadness or loneliness. Oh, interesting. Okay. What's beneath that loneliness, right? And really just developing and cultivating this awareness of how do I feel in this moment? Whether you set 5 alarms on your phone that go off during the day, it's really just a constant practice and awareness of what is it, and really allowing yourself to put labels to how you feel. So you can actually compartmentalize and be able to know what anger is, what shame is, what loneliness, what anxiety is. So when it does arise, you're like, oh, I'm feeling anxious. Got you. Right? When we're feeling anxious, we're fearful of something that's happening in the future that hasn't happened yet. Okay. And we're fearful of that based on what happened in the past. So we're anxious in this moment because we're fearful of what might happen based on what happened in the past. So it's really cultivating this awareness, and it's really, like, honestly, having a guide or a mentor that can help you with this. But the number one key to transformation is awareness. It's awareness of how you feel in this moment. It's awareness of what's happening in this moment. It's awareness of, the life that you've created for yourself and the things that are playing out for you, the relationship patterns that keep repeating themselves, the habits that you keep turning to avoid or distract the emotion, right? It's the awareness of that. And then it's also the awareness of the roots, right? The little boy, where did that little boy experience that? Or where didn't he have a safe space to actually be angry and feel his anger without his parents pulling love away from him, or being shamed for having anger or being frustrated? So the number one key is the first step is awareness in all sense, awareness of this present moment and awareness of the past. Because the more awareness we bring to what happened in the past, the more awareness we have as to how that shows up in the current moment. And therefore we can consciously choose a new reality. But when we're not aware of what happened in the past, we're unaware of how it shows up in the present moment. And therefore we just keep replaying and repeating the same shit over and over and over. And nothing actually changes. So the first step would be awareness.
I love that so much. Let's talk about that then, like moving into relationship dynamics. Because I know for myself personally, there came a point when I realized none of my relationships were going to be successful because there was still work that I had to do for myself that I didn't realize. And a lot of it was based on insecurity and insufficiency and not feeling good enough for someone, even though I was really truly giving my best. And just always going back to that feeling every time something happened or went a different way than I expected, or someone didn't show up how I thought they would, or, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to take a really long time away from relationships just in general to work on myself. And for men in that same scenario, what are the things that you think a woman can be doing in relationship for a man that's going to help him get in touch with recognizing those emotions, and also being able to say, hey, this bothers me? For example, a lot of men, they do have like a tendency towards anger over sadness, right? Not always, I don't know, but that's just what I see a lot of the time. And so for me, anger is like a repellent for me. When someone gets angry, especially in a relationship with a male, the second I sense anger or irritation, I'm immediately like, like I want to put a wall between us. And so how can a woman show up in a way that a man can hear her in those scenarios without it feeling like he's being attacked or like it's something wrong with him versus just the moment that they're in? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah. So typically beneath the anger is sadness or grief or shame. So like I said, anger is typically the lid to the emotion. It's actually beneath the surface. So for a man, and this is not like, as he starts building and cultivating this connection with his emotions and being able to label his emotions, it doesn't mean that he can just project it. So what's really important, especially with a man's anger, is having a safe space for him to express his rage and to cultivate a sacred connection to like his warrior energy. He's like bringing sacredness to his rage and his anger and turning it into passion and into like his warrior energy. And what he really needs is brothers around him to actually support him in that. So what's really important is that a man has a space where he can be supported by other men or other leaders, right? Where he can actually tap into these parts of himself. So when he notices, and depending on what scale, the anger is, if he notices like, and this is where he needs to have that emotional intelligence of, is this, can I ground into myself and communicate from my heart here, right? Or is it, hey, like, let's take 24 hours, I need to go and process this. And he has a space to go and actually feel and be with that anger, and a safe space to actually let it out and to connect with it and to be with what's actually beneath the anger. That's because typically like emotions arise within our body because they're seeking, the information's arising to seek for our attention. Our body's always trying to speak to us in some way. So for him to go and cultivate that awareness of what's actually going on, right, where it doesn't become like an uncontrollable reactivity in the relationship, right? This is where he needs that support outside, that brotherhood that can truly support him. So it's not a woman's role, responsibility, or job to actually support him in it. Yet she can provide the safe space, for him, and she can be the invitation for him by her setting her boundaries, by her doing her own work, right? By her being in tune with herself. So it's not her responsibility. What I would say the greatest thing, if you're in relationship and your man's doing the work, he's in the work, the greatest thing you can do is honor him and appreciate him for what he is actually bringing to the table. Because as humans, sometimes we can be very wired to all the things that aren't going well, right? Or all the things that he's not doing right.
So true.
Think of the school system. The school system is mostly focused on like where you're not doing well. So it's looking at and actually appreciating the things that he is doing and praising him for that. Like one of the number one needs for the masculine energy is appreciation. When a man feels deeply appreciated and honored and respected, he feels free in that. So it's not her responsibility, right? It's really his responsibility to have that brotherhood outside of the relationship for support. And then he can bring that awareness to the relationship, right? That big mistake is when men use the relationship as their foundation of support.
Yeah.
So the greatest way that she can support him is for her to go first, for her to be the invitation through her doing her own work. For example, it's like, hey, I just like, when he's in a calm, regulated place, like it's sharing from a place of like, hey, like that's that needs to be, or it's a boundary for me because this is how your anger actually makes me feel unsafe. I don't feel safe in this dynamic. And when I don't feel safe, I struggle to, be there to love and appreciate and support you because I'm activated now.
Yeah.
And it's also you, or a woman facing, her wounds with the masculine as well. That the greatest gift of a man as well is he can actually be that safe space for her to repattern and heal those wounds of the masculine, when a safe man is able to actually show up in a way that she's never experienced before. And for a lot of women, that'll be very foreign. And sometimes it might be triggering. It might feel like, oh, there's something missing here. Sometimes this safe relationship or safe people actually feel so foreign that it feels unhealthy to them. So the greatest way is for her going first and him having that support outside of the relationship.
That's so true. And you really hit the nail on the head, especially for women and actually really anyone, but women in domestic violence situations or toxic relationships that had been a pattern in their life, which often is what happens. Going into something safe and healthy for the first time, it's like they're still waiting for something wrong. They're still looking for the bad because they're so wired for that they're like, they can almost become nitpicky because they're just like, they're seeing everything that this person does wrong, and they're like calculating it in their head, okay, when's this bomb gonna go off, and when is this person gonna show me who they really are? At least that's how they feel. And then there's also the flip side of where they're just like, this person's so nice and so consistent and so stable that something has to be wrong here. You know?
Yeah,
But
I would say for women to trust a man's actions more than his words to begin with, until
yeah,
they start kind of aligning. Like,
so
okay, like
true.
there is consistency here. And it's also choosing to see the consistency. It's choosing to see the safety that he does bring. It's choosing to see how he does actually show up.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of safe, healthy, masculine men out there that get into relationships with women who have the lenses on. They're looking through the glasses of a men are unsafe. So it's actually impossible for this man, right, to be a safe space, because no matter what, she's looking through the lenses and she'll find the smallest things.
Yep. That's so true. That was one of the reasons why I took a long break too, was because I realized that I wasn't even at a place to show up as my best self and to see, the reality versus my patterns, from before. So I think that's really good. And I love how you talked about community with men, which you don't see a lot. Especially, and I don't know if it's different in other countries, but in America, it's a very like individual lifestyle. Like people are very independent, and we get separated more and more all the time, especially with the rise of social media and things like that. And so you don't see a lot of community things anymore. And you notice, depression going up, you notice violence going up, it's all getting higher. And I think that is like truly one of the things that's missing the most, is this like the sense of community, the sense of people that love you, that can hold you accountable. And I think that's really important for men and women. But in particular, you talk about that a lot with men. And I'd love for you to talk more about that and like how you kind of formulated your own community too, because I do think sometimes maybe they don't even know how to do that. Like when those resources aren't available, how can they formulate relationships like that, especially when men struggle to be more open and vulnerable in general, if that makes sense.
Yep. The chronic illness of the wounded inner child. So the chronic disease that plagues most people, or a lot of people, especially a lot of men, is loneliness. Mm-hmm. So loneliness is a byproduct, and as a result, right, and I call it a chronic illness, right? It's this underlying feeling of disconnection, of loneliness, of emptiness, of sadness, that then drives a man to be and become whoever he needs to be in order to avoid feeling that loneliness and that emptiness, which leads to deep depression, which leads to high-performing men who are actually depressed. Yeah. And that deep loneliness is, like I said, the result of the wounded inner boy. It's the result of a little boy who didn't have the safe space to build a strong connection to himself, the capital S self. But what happens is when he doesn't have that safe space, he doesn't have those core emotional needs met, he disconnects and he builds the false self, right? That's where I built that false self, that false identity. And I was in that world, right? I was so disconnected from myself, and the level of loneliness and emptiness that I felt was unbearable. And the thing is, it's like the saying of feeling lonely in a crowded room.
Yeah.
And I'd feel more lonely being in relationship and being around people than actually being on my own. So that deep sense of loneliness and that, being around people, and that saying of feeling lonely in a crowded room is because you have all of these people around you, yet you still feel empty. And it's just a reflection of the emotional disconnection that you experienced as a little boy.
Wow.
So as humans, especially as men, we heal in community. Like we're wired to be in tribe. We're wired to be in brotherhood, right? We're wired to hunt in packs. Yeah, a man that tries to go alone, the journey on his own, right, is like it's like the lone wolf mentality. Yeah, because there's deep loneliness there, and he's doing everything in his power to avoid feeling that deep sense of loneliness by being in community. Yeah. Or he's so shame-based, right? He's scared to be seen by other men.
That's so true.
Yeah. So I used to just do one-on-one work with men. And then I recognized that the power of brotherhood is actually really where a man experiences deep, profound transformation. Being in the space of community, where he feels truly held by not just me, but by other men who are also doing the work as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that deep sense of loneliness, and in a world where we feel like we're progressing with technology and everything else, right, we're actually becoming more disconnected over time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never been more important for us to prioritize like real community. So men having their brothers, having a sacred brotherhood that they turn to every single week. For me, I've got multiple different brotherhood circles just for me, not for my clients or anything, just for me. It's for me first. I've got those men that hold me and support me when I'm not okay. Right. Some of my deepest, darkest things I've ever been through. I went through a separation a couple of years ago where I was literally abandoned by, like, this woman left me in a foreign country, and I was just on my own, and I had no one there. Right. We'd been together for just over a year and everything was amazing. Got home one day and she just left. And with that, I was stuck. Like, I was like, I had no one. I was in this foreign country, but I had my brothers. So what we did was daily, we jumped on Zoom. We sat in circles together on Zoom, and they held me while I just sat there and just felt just that my little boy finally felt this support, this bedrock of healthy masculine men just holding me. And women need that too. Yeah. Women need their sisters. They need to be, with their sisters. And it's never been more important for us, especially with where the world's going. And for the most part, like, every person is wounded from childhood. Everyone. No one escaped childhood without a few cuts.
That's right. Right.
And those cuts turn to loneliness over time and disconnection over time. Like, the amount of women that have sister wounds, that struggle being around other women because of the comparison, because of all of the manipulation, all of that happens with women. And men, right, is so disconnected from brotherhood and being around other men because it's so confronting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's such a cultural or societal shame about that, I feel like, over men, especially over men. Like, it's definitely more accepted for women to be emotional and be in touch with their emotions and seek therapy and seek support. And I feel like for men, there's a lot of shame around that, or like some sort of, it's just, it feels uninviting for them, especially, in the US in particular, and maybe in other places too. But that's what makes me so sad, because it's so needed, but there's so much shame in it. And I wish that there were ways that we could promote it more as what it really is, and not what culture has kind of made it out to be. Are there specific things, like specific practices that you have for yourself that you feel like have been the most effective for your healing?
Yeah, there's many different practices, but they're quite obviously in depth. But I would say one of the greatest practices of, like, just starting out is what I shared before. It's around cultivating that awareness of how you feel in any given moment. Being able to tune in and check in. What is this emotion what is my body trying to speak to me? So the greatest way that we can actually silence the noise of the mind, especially for men who spend so much time in our head, planning, making decisions, leading, thinking about problems, solving problems, right? That was so in our head. And so many men are pretty much disconnected from the chin down because of the little boy who didn't have the safety to actually be in his body, right? Yeah. So the greatest practice that we can actually do to get out of our head and into our body is breath work.
Ooh, that's
through the breath. The breath is pretty much the remote control to our nervous system. So being able to regulate, calm, and soothe our nervous system through the breath is how we actually slow down the brain waves, right? And we actually become in more coherence with our heart. So that's when we're able to slow down the mind and get into a more meditative state. And when we go from the analytical, so it's a high beta brainwave, so it's a higher frequency, to a lower, slower alpha/theta state, which is in more coherence with our heart. And in doing so, basically, we're becoming incoherent with our body, and we're able to silence the noise in the mind and listen to the whispers that our body is trying to speak to us, which is the emotions. And then being able to tune in and check in with, how do I feel in this moment? And how much can I accept this moment just as it is without needing to change this emotion, without needing to run from it, without needing to be anything other than what it is right now in this moment? How much can I be with this emotion and this feeling? And in that, when a man is able to sit with his anger, be with, breathe into it, get out of his head into his body, be with the anger, navigate where it is in his body, navigate. And another powerful practice as well within that is giving the emotion a voice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if this anger had a voice, what would it say? Right? If there was an emotion beneath this anger, what would it be? Sadness. Oh, okay. Right. If that sadness had a voice, what would it say? If that loneliness had a voice, what would it say? And this is where we start getting into the younger parts of us, the little boy that's actually in the moment, the emotions of that practice right there. Like that's like the gateway. That's like the key to really cultivating emotional intelligence, emotional awareness. And if you can do that in any given moment, that's really the beginning, because then you get to be with what's actually at the root of how I'm feeling and what's going on in what's beneath this procrastination right now, what's beneath this defensiveness or reactivity. And we get to actually start working with the absolute root of what's playing out.
That's so good. That's so good. What do you think are the signs that a woman could look for that a man really is safe and healthy and working on himself outside of what he says?
Consistency is a big one. Consistency in his emotions, consistency in how he shows up, seeing consistency like in his life, like that really. And what through consistency, what that does is that creates a level of predictability in the egoic mind of a woman. So her ego has this sense of, I can predict how he's going to show up. Therefore, I don't have to try and guess how he's feeling or how he's going to show up. Therefore, I can get out of my head and get into my heart, into my body.
Yeah.
So consistency would be, and with consistency comes him, being deeply integral, having integrity, being integral with his word. So consistency would be, I feel, what it takes for a man to be, and it's not consistent from the standpoint of he's really good at not feeling his emotions or avoiding his emotions. It's it's him having that sense of stability and grounding within his emotions.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, he's got brothers around him where he's supported outside of a relationship, where he's not looking for the relationship to be his savior or for the relationship to be his bedrock and his foundation.
That would say that's one of the challenges as a woman, is noticing the difference between emotional regulation versus avoidant of emotion altogether in men, because it can kind of look the same, like you can, I think of like relationships where I dated people that were probably more avoidant, but to me it looked like stability because they weren't ever really tapping into any emotion for the most part, right? And so to me, I thought, oh, he's just emotionally stable, and and that felt consistent until it wasn't, right? So that's interesting. I wonder if there are ways to distinguish between the two.
It's really, because there can be that very stoic energy, you're right. And it's also, it's for a man, like it's him having the ability to feel his deepest emotions and to be grounded in it and to not get ungrounded by it or to not get taken over by it. And it's also, looking at his actions, like, does he have healthy men and brothers around him? For the most part, like you can tell a lot about someone by the people they spend the most time with, by the men that they have, right? So a lot of times the way I judge a man, like, if I want to be or spend time with that person is, who do they spend the most time with? What kinds of people do they allow into their world and into, right? So if I think for a woman, it'd be important to be like, okay, let's look at his brotherhood. Does he have men around him who are emotionally connected to themselves, who are in healthy relationships, right? Every single one of my friends are in like my close inner circle, like really close. I have like a close brotherhood of 4 men, and every single one of them is in a relationship that inspires me.
Oh, that's amazing.
They're in a relationship where, they have a beautiful family, and it's a family dynamic that inspires me and excites me. And like, that's what I would be looking for. It's like, what kinds of people does he surround himself with?
That's so good. Do you think it's a red flag if a man has mostly female friends and very few male friends? Like close, yeah, just, yeah.
Yes. Depends. Yes. Yep. Now, it's not saying that it's bad for a man to have female friends, but
right.
Place is he in those relationship dynamics. And if he doesn't have this strong, healthy, connected brotherhood, I know so many men like this, because this was me first. I connected with women so much easier. I had so many more women friends and women connections than I did men.
Okay.
Right. But beneath that was this little boy who's seeking to be held by the feminine.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's a very big difference between having healthy, strong, masculine men and leaders in your life and having being more connected to women. And it's that when a man brings his challenges to a woman, he's typically seeking to be held.
Yeah.
When he brings his challenges to men who are in their power, who are leaders of their own life, he will not only be supported, but he'll also be challenged as well. And a man needs that healthy masculine challenge, like lions that challenge each other to determine who's the king. Like you need that healthy challenge in order for a man to really live in integrity with his depth. And
true.
Every man that I know that has more female friends than brothers, like true brothers around him, there's no depth because he hasn't met himself. He's actually avoiding his potential by not being in brotherhood or having those men around him to challenge and support him, because we need both. We need challenge and support.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. I want to know, I have a couple more questions, but how does a man who's completely blocked off from emotions, and I know you talked a lot about checking in with your emotions and evaluating how you feel, but how does a man who is completely blocked off, 100%, like doesn't even know how to get to that point? Like what is the first step for him to actually get to a place where he can even allow himself to feel something?
The first step for me was breath work. The first step with me was, building a relationship with my breath. I like to say that the quality of our life is determined upon the quality and connection that we have to our breath. That's the first thing that you can do to tune into your emotional body, is to breathe, to consciously breathe. So for me in my journey, I shared, that big pivotal point where I went from being a builder to, into the world that I'm in now. It wasn't just this decision where I woke up overnight and I'm like, I'm just going to do this now. It was a period of time of I noticed I was depressed. I noticed that, I was so lonely, empty, unfulfilled, unhappy. And what I started to notice was I had some friends or some mentors that I looked up to on social media. And I noticed that they did breathwork every day. So what I did was I actually jumped on a free breathwork session. And I was like, what did I just experience? That was amazing. So what I did was I then got out Wim Hof and started learning about Wim Hof, right? And then I started the Wim Hof method. So you can go on YouTube and do his 4 or 5 round breathwork practice. I started doing it every single day. And what started happening was I just started opening just that little bit more. I started getting out of my head just that little, and these emotions would just start coming. This sense of joy and feeling connected started coming through, and it just started opening my mind to more and more and more, and opening my body and allowing my ego to get a little bit quiet to actually feel what was beneath the surface. So I would say, because the greatest gift that I received, that was the catalyst to my entire journey, was the breath. I still remember specifically this day, after doing, I think it was like a week of it. And then I was sitting there in the sun, and it was just like this sense of, I'm connected with everything. It was a sense of like cracking open, this sense of like reality just looks different. It's like I wasn't just learning information. It was like I actually changed within my nervous system and experienced this shift. So that's where I would begin if I was starting out.
That's so good and so beautiful. Thank you for that. I have to say that you're 27, right? Is that what you had said?
28.
28. Okay. Well, you are so much further ahead than so many men. I'm very impressed by it, by the way. I think it's exceptional and wonderful, and I'm so glad you're doing this work. I think it's really important. I wonder if you think, what is your take on bridging the divide between men and women and the misconceptions that maybe we have about one another when it comes to intimacy and relationship and love?
Yes, great question. There's so much we could go into with this, but I think, and this might trigger a few people, but it's honoring that there's a difference between male and female, right? There's a level of safety that a man provides a woman that she can't really experience on her own.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
really
true.
honoring the roles that we play within male, female, masculine, and feminine. So think of like the sense of safety that a man actually brings into a relationship. It's like really honoring that we are different.
Yeah.
We're biologically wired differently. We're made up differently. And I think it's really coming back to the roots of man and woman. You know, whether you're gay, you're in a gay relationship, and it's really honoring as well, like your expression in that as well, because polarity is what creates sexual attraction, which is opposites. So opposites attract. So more of the masculine energy attracts more of the light feminine energy, right? So even if
Yeah.
you're in that kind of dynamic, it's also it's in a way it's very similar. But I'm speaking about like male, female, masculine and feminine dynamic relationship. It's really coming back to the foundation of like we are different and we have differences that we can provide to each other. And it's really honoring that. It's honoring what a man can bring to the table, and it's honoring what a woman brings to the table for a man, right? And
Yeah.
whether that's, you know, his ability to be able to lead, provide emotional safety, provide financially, provide stability, provide a bedrock and foundation for a family. And, you know, her being able to provide this sense of love and nurturing, this sense of support, this sense of continuously inviting him into sharpening his axe. That's the greatest thing the feminine can bring to the masculine is she's always inviting him into his deeper truth. She's always constantly just finding ways through just her being herself that constantly are invitations for him to step into his potential by facing his deepest truth. So it's coming back to like what we actually offer each other, what we both bring to the table, and honoring those roles. Yeah, I like to say, if you're a woman and you want a king needs space to be a king, right? And therefore, like she can be the queen alongside her king. It's not saying that, you know, there's different, you know, one's above the other. It's like that's the dynamic, right? A king gets to be a king because he has his queen. And I like to say that a king can only really be a king because he has his queen constantly whispering truth into his ear.
Yeah, that's so good.
Coming back to those dynamics, yeah.
I think that's beautiful. I have to say, I think a woman shows up as her best when she does feel safe. I think safety is like the number one thing for women. Emotional safety and physical safety, obviously, but I think that emotional safety is going to provide the greatest partner in a woman because she can be, you know, feminine and even submissive in some ways, and she can be lighthearted and joyful and loving and nurturing and feel like she's safe to do that. But when a woman feels unsafe, she pulls away from those things. She becomes guarded and like feels like she has to constantly protect herself, which, you know, I think happens a lot in those dynamics in abusive relationships too. But I love all of this so much. This was so amazing. Thank you so much. And for your work again, I think it's incredible. And I am just so inspired by it and everything you've done, and all of your posts too are so amazing. I even like them. They're not even for me, they're for men, but I'm even like, oh my God, that's so good. Like I can relate to this. Like this helps me. But I want to know how people can find you and how they can find your coaching program.
Yeah, so just on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Ryan Moresby-White, just one word. Yeah, if people want to learn more about coaching and what I offer, yeah, it's all there. Like you can download my free guide. You can there's an application form there that you can go through. But for the most part, like my DMs are open. If anyone wants to message or ask questions, like that space is there as well.
And your community groups are there as well.
Yeah, so my community. So I've got 3 levels how men can work with me, and there's a community aspect to all of those levels. There's a brotherhood to all of those levels. Yep.
Do you offer any coaching or anything like that to women at all?
Maybe in the future. I used to. Yeah, I used to, but I'm really, my whole thing is, and maybe someone to take from this for, especially a man listening to this, is one of my earliest mentors shared with me an acronym of FOCUS, and it's follow one course until successful. So one thing I've been really good at is just getting really good at the one thing. Like just focus on one thing and just be the specialist at that one thing. And that's really where I'm at. So it's like men helping them heal the boy. Like that's my one thing. Yeah.
No, I love that. That's good. And I think it's needed. There are less, resources for men than there are women. So I think it's important. But anyway, well, that's it. That's all we have for today. So again, thank you so much for taking this time and waking up early for this. I know it's earlier there in Australia. So
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a great weekend.